listener production.
Hi, Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to The Briefing. You might be used to seeing gym, finance, animal or cooking videos as you scroll your feed, but what about gambling? Experts say there's now a growing number of influencers posting themselves having a slap at the pokies and placing bets online, and it's making its way to young people.
A lot of people now who broadcast gambling content didn't begin doing that. A lot began streaming games like Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever. They built up a probably predominantly young demographic of viewers and then shifted with that demographic kind of going along with them.
That chat with an influencer and gambling expert is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Thursday, the 7th of August.
Hey Helen, and to you listening, we're starting this morning in New South Wales, where convicted sex offender and Kiama MP Gareth Ward is still a sitting member of Parliament after his lawyers argued expelling him while his appeal is pending would be offensive to democracy. On Tuesday, the New South Wales Parliament was due to expel the former Liberal minister, who was last week found guilty of sexual offences against two men, however was stopped by a court temporary restraining order. And according to court documents, Ward's lawyers have argued that the people of Kiama voted for Ward to represent them even after he'd been charged, and that expelling him would be an act of punishment that overrides the judicial process. And technically speaking, if we're just going by the New South Wales Constitution, Helen, they do have an argument because it says any MP convicted of a serious offence, so resulting in a jail term of 5 years or more, can be disqualified, but not until the appeal process is finalised.
Separately, also relating to the New South Wales Parliament, it also failed to condemn MP Mark Latham this week for disclosing authorised government information after he cited a psychologist report that formed part of a civil case brought against him by openly gay Sydney MP Alex Greenwich. In the case, Latham's accused of unlawful homosexual vilification and sexual harassment in the workplace. And earlier in the week, a motion was moved to condemn Latham for revealing deeply personal medical records about Greenwich from the case. But he denied he'd broken standing orders as the information was publicly available and said he'd share it again. While that motion didn't pass, he was instead referred to the Privileges Committee for sharing information from a separate confidential report relating to the New South Wales Police.
US President Donald Trump, for the first time, has hinted at his successor being none other than Vice President J.D. Vance.
Do you agree that the heir apparent to MAGA is J.D. Vance?
Well, I think most likely, in all fairness, he's the vice president. I think Marco is also somebody that maybe would get together with J.D. in some form.
Now, Trump says Vance is most likely to secure the Republican Party nomination for president in 2028 after previously avoiding to confirm his top pick earlier this year, saying it was too soon to make the call. Now, the president also suggested that Vance could team up with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio as his running mate.
Yeah, very interesting. So this helps rule out rumours that the president would try and rewrite the rules after he suggested serving a third term several times, and this is despite the US Constitution limiting presidents to 2 terms. But Trump's official online store does still sell T-shirts with Trump 28 and rewrite the rules on them. However, he told media this week he would probably not seek a third term, but says, "I'd like to run. I have the best poll numbers I've ever had. You know why? Because people love the tariffs."
Do they?
Yeah. However, a recent Gallup poll from an analytics company based in Washington found Trump's approval rating has hit a new low, with an overall approval rating of 37% among US adults.
The trial of Outback Wrangler TV star Matt Wright has heard allegations that he tried to cover up his previous aviation breaches after a fatal helicopter crash in the Northern Territory in 2022. The crash occurred while Wright and 2 others were attempting to collect crocodile eggs in the NT, with Wright's co-star Chris Wilson killed and passenger Sebastian Robinson left a paraplegic. Now, Wright is not accused of causing the crash, the resulting death or injuries. Rather, he's been charged with 3 accounts of perverting the course of justice, and he's basically accused of tampering with evidence that might have revealed times that he'd not followed strict aviation regulations.
Yeah, so he's accused of not properly recording his helicopter flying hours, dismantling the recording system to try and extend the helicopter's life, of playing around with the dash after the crash to check that the meter wasn't working, as well as lying to police about how much fuel was in the helicopter at the time. And part of the evidence the court will hear are actually covert listening device recordings, where Wright's apparently heard telling someone, "I didn't see any effing fuel in the tank, 0, as well as telling his wife at one point, "I'll be found guilty of not keeping my effing paperwork up to speed."
Yeah, and police and prosecutors basically say that Wright had a history of manipulating his helicopter records and that he actually knew he was going to be investigated for this on the day of the crash and face possible charges. Now, the trial is set to continue today, with Matt Wright pleading not guilty to all charges.
WhatsApp has deleted over 6.8 million accounts linked to scammers and large-scale operations who are targeting users around the world. Meta, the platform's parent company, says many of the accounts they've taken down over the last 6 months had ties with scam centres in Southeast Asia, who often use forced labour in their operations.
And the crackdown was basically targeting criminals hijacking WhatsApp accounts or adding users to unwanted group chats with investment schemes. This has happened to me 1,001 times. And it's part of the platform's new anti-scam rollout that alerts users of potential fraudulent activities. So typically, these scams would start with contacting potential targets with a text message before taking the conversation to social media or private messaging apps. And then the fraud is usually completed on payment or cryptocurrency platforms.
Yeah, and it turns out OpenAI's ChatGPT was also involved in the takedown. WhatsApp and Meta worked with the developer, finding a Cambodian criminal group had used the chatbot to create instructions to use on potential scam victims, with one scam offering cash for likes on social media posts to promote a fake rent-a-scooter pyramid scheme. So some of these centres operating from countries like Myanmar, Cambodia and Thailand scam people out of billions of dollars, and they're also known to recruit people who are then forced to carry out the fraudulent activity.
Thorpe is leading. Goal goes to Thorpe. 1:44.71. I think it means an awful lot. The pressure on this guy, I've never seen him so emotional.
Now, if you remember that historic moment of Ian Thorpe winning gold at the 2004 Olympics in Athens, you might remember that that era was dubbed the golden age for Australian swimming, a time that we could boast having the world's best swimmers like Thorpe, Grant Hackett, Susie O'Neill, and the golden age before that was people like Dawn Fraser and John Devitt. But it looks as though we might have just one-upped the history books, with former Olympians saying we are now living through the best Australian swimming we have ever seen right now. And that's thanks to the performances of swimming stars like Molly O'Callaghan and Kaylee McEwen.
But McEwen is now taking over the lead. It may even be a world record. McEwen goes in and takes the gold. Molly O'Callaghan, exceptional work. Another gold medal.
Go the girls. 4-time Olympic champion Kate Campbell's come out and made the call saying people always talk about the golden age being 10, 20 years ago without realising what's unfolding right before their eyes right now on the world swimming stage. And that's because Molly O'Callaghan's actually already equalled Ian Thorpe's 11 world title record, and Kaylee McEwen, well, she's already Australia's most successful athlete in history. And this is not just in swimming, but in any sport with 5 gold medals.
Yeah, honestly, it feels like every week I'm seeing Kaylee and Molly's names in the news, winning more gold, breaking more records, which is just amazing. It's so exciting. And hopefully we'll still see them competing when it comes time for the 2032 Olympics here in Brizzy. I'll hopefully get to go and watch them with my own eyes, and plus any other rising stars. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, that'll be such a show. Now, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is your deep dive, Tara, looking into the rise of gambling influencers and how it's even allowed given Australia's strict gambling advertisement laws. Or are they really as strict as they might seem? We'll find out next.
play your favourite machine. Only catch is, whatever feature we win, we have to put it on black.
2.4 mil! Boom! Here at the Bull Rush machines, that one is my favourite one.
Yes! $1,920. Let's go, boys. From $50. You can't make this up. Till the next video.
These are just some of the videos that are popping up everywhere online right now. Influencers and streamers posting videos of them gambling to TikTok, Instagram, YouTube and Twitch. Some using online gambling platforms, others just while they're down at the pokies. Many of them with hundreds of thousands to millions of views. And the ones watching? Largely young people. And it's got experts worried. Dr. Mark Johnson is a researcher from the University of Sydney who's looked into influencers and this growing emergence of gambling content online. Dr. Johnson, thanks so much for joining me on the briefing today. We're seeing more and more social media influencers and streamers promoting and filming themselves gambling. What's the concern?
I think that there's a number of aspects here. So one aspect is that, as you say, there's very little in the way of age gating on most of these things, whether you go onto a gambling broadcast on Twitch or on Kick or something like that. A pop-up appears and says, are you 18? Yes, no. If you click yes, then you get to watch it. And I don't think that's going to kind of outfox any young person who wants to watch these streams. So the age gating is extremely lax, and that's one aspect. Another aspect, of course, is that these sorts of broadcasts, not just on Twitch and Kick, but also on pre-recorded video sites like YouTube and TikTok and so on. Another concern is that these are videos which kind of slip around existing laws about gambling, advertising and marketing and so on. And so they aren't essentially regulated or legislated right now. And then another concern, I think, as well, is that when we combine gambling with influencers, and given how much people, particularly young people, but people of all ages, can become kind of connected to influencers and feel like they are friends with them and be inclined or motivated to copy or emulate what influencers do and what kind of lifestyle they seem to have and so on. When an influencer is broadcasting real money gambling play rather than broadcasting something else, I think it's pretty clear kind of where the issues lie. And then I think the fourth and final concern is that in lots of these streams, there are referral links to the online casinos that these broadcasters and content creators are playing on. And most of these online casinos are cryptocurrency casinos, which are also themselves quite poorly age-gated and age-regulated. So there's kind of a whole suite of concerns here, I think.
And you have actually researched these influencers and streamers, like you said. Are they doing it just for fun? Are they getting paid? Or is it a bit of a mix?
Great question. I think a bit of a mix. So there's certainly some people who aren't trying to make this into their job. They are people who just enjoy playing slots or online blackjack or roulette or whatever it might be, and they want to broadcast themselves doing so, and they want to kind of connect to like-minded people. But with that said, there's also people at the other extreme who do this as their job, or who at least aspire to do it as their job. And in some of those cases, one of the key concerns is that we know that sometimes these gambling sites sponsor these streamers and broadcasters and influencers and content creators to stream or record themselves playing on their sites, but the specific nature or terms of those contracts aren't publicly known. So what that means is that, let's say, a streamer goes on site X and spins a slot machine 1,000 times and winds up losing money, but they might make an overall profit because that site paid them to go and stream on their site, and they might have paid them enough to offset whatever they expected them to lose, and the site paid them, so the people who watch their broadcast might be encouraged to go onto that site and play themselves.
And you mentioned before that these people are kind of able to get around existing laws, perhaps because we're seeing it on different kinds of platforms. What exactly is allowed and what isn't in this space?
Playing specific kinds of online games is banned in Australia, and there are some gambling streamers who seem to be based in Australia and who seem to be playing on those sites. And this is why the recent ACMA release about this talked about that as well. A lot of the legal issues come from the fact that lots of these sites are offshore sites and aren't registered in Australia specifically, but also that the broadcasting of play on these sites isn't really regulated at all, either here or in any country. So broadcasting your play, if you're based here, but the site that you're playing on is based elsewhere, right now, as far as I can tell, there's no particular legal code to address that, at least right now. And that's a real challenge, I think.
Yeah, and that's interesting because there's such strict advertising rules on other platforms like TV and radio. And as you mentioned, there is laws when it comes to influencers or streamers promoting illegal online gambling. But what about just regular gambling, like a video of them hitting the pokies?
As far as I or my colleagues can tell, there's no law which really addresses this at this point. There's no state or federal level laws, as far as we can tell, I stress, because this is a very kind of novel and emerging field right now. But in general, people who are recording themselves doing gambling play in person, in physical spaces, tend to be uploading those more to YouTube and Twitch and Instagram, while live streamed gambling play tends to be for online sites, so that's more broadcast on Twitch and Kick. And right now, the broadcasting of online sites does seem to be far more watched, which I guess is just because it's far easier to do, just log into a site than to get dressed and get out and find a place and film yourself and so on. But both exist, and both, like I say, do seem to not be covered by existing laws, which is, I think, in part a kind of reflection of a particular imagining of what advertising means and what marketing means for gambling sites, and those aren't really covered in videos or live streams of this kind of play.
And some state government surveys suggest that as much as 30 to 40% of underage youth are taking part in gambling, while for 18 and 19-year-olds, even close to half of them. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's just social media, or are there other things that are influencing young people into gambling?
Those are very striking figures, of course. I think that the appeal of the influencer is really a very important part of this, particularly for young people at a time when so much life takes place online. I think that the appeal of kind of a friend who seems to be also a kind of celebrity as well at the same time is very compelling, is very appealing. And also, of course, a lot of people now who broadcast gambling content didn't begin doing that. A lot began streaming games like Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever, and then they shifted into gambling content later. And what that means is that they've built up a kind of viewer base within a certain, probably predominantly young demographic of viewers, and then shifted with that demographic kind of going along with them into gambling play. So I think the influencer relationship side and the perception of friendship or kind of commitment, I think those aspects are very important as well and go a little bit beyond what sites like Facebook and so on can offer.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And Australians have the highest per capita losses to gambling in the world. And that was pre kind of the influence of social media influencers and streamers. Do you think, is this something we need to be teaching in schools or needs government intervention on? What needs to change?
I think the place to start is that based on the last 5 or 10 years, it's clear that watching gambling play is now a massive part of the gambling world, and yet it's almost completely unstudied. It's not seen as something to kind of address or talk about or think about. And yet my recent study on this showed that roughly half of all people who watch gambling broadcasts, whether on Twitch or on Kick or elsewhere, feel it makes them more likely to then go and play with their real money. And that's a huge number, particularly when, as you say, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people, both here in Australia and elsewhere as well, who watch these broadcasts. And then beyond that, I think particularly because these sites skew young, I do think schools would be a great place to reach young people and to kind of explore these risks of these kinds of content creators. Another option is to regulate the streamers, but my recent study showed that lots of gambling streamers on Twitch who are expected to adhere to Twitch's rules, they simply ignore them. Some even just move abroad and stream from abroad or use a VPN to seem to stream from abroad or just mask where they are streaming from and so on. And so it's very tricky, I think, when you have a kind of scenario where you could imagine a British streamer playing on a German slot site, being broadcast via Twitch, which is a US site, and being watched by someone here in Oz. It's very difficult, I think, to see at what point do we step in and try to address this and try to deal with this. And like I say, that's not saying we shouldn't try, but I think the extremely transnational nature of these sorts of broadcasts will make it tricky. But focusing on the streamers and their kind of duty of care to their viewers, I think would probably be the most effective start, given those kind of complexities of platforms and countries and so on.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly complex and a lot to obviously consider there. Thanks very much, Dr. Johnson, for your insight. There's a lot of great information there about what could be fueling this issue. Really appreciate you joining me on the briefing.
You're super welcome. Thanks so much for having me on.
That was University of Sydney influencer and gambling researcher Dr. Mark Johnson speaking with me there. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.
Listener.